I married Sarah 3 years ago, and for a time, everything felt perfect. We had a lovely life in our cozy house in Portland, Oregon. Sarah was the kind of woman who could light up a room. Her laughter was infectious, and she had this way of making even the most mundane days feel special. We shared friendships, interests, and even a couple of cats, Mittens and Whiskers. Life was good, or so I thought. But as the saying goes, every rose has its thorn, and I started to notice some little things that pricked at my heart. It began with Sarah's late nights at the office. She worked in marketing, and I understood that deadlines sometimes meant long hours. But when she started coming home later and later, her excuses felt flimsy. "Just a big project," she'd say, or "you know how it is, honey. Everyone's so busy." I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking it. Then there were the changes in her behavior. She became more secretive about her phone. I'd catch her texting, but as soon as she saw me looking, she'd quickly hide the screen. Whenever I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off, saying I was being paranoid or just jealous. Maybe I was. I wanted to trust her, and so I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. But one evening, everything changed. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I noticed a notification on Sarah's phone. It lit up with a message from an unknown number. I didn't mean to invade her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at it and my heart dropped. It read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Just you and me like old times." I felt a surge of panic. Who was this person? Like old times, my mind raced. I could no longer ignore the signs. I confronted Sarah when she got home, and her reaction was nothing short of a masterclass in denial. She laughed it off, claiming it was some old friend from college who was just messing with her. "You know how my friends are," she said, her voice dripping with annoyance. "You really think I would cheat on you? Come on, Jake. You know me better than that." Those words sunk deep into my soul, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. I needed to know the truth. That night I decided to do some digging. I waited until she was asleep, then picked up her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I unlocked it easily. She always kept it on a basic passcode. I scrolled through her messages, and the more I read, the more sick I felt. Texts filled with flirty banter, innuendos, and plans to meet up with someone named Max. Max. I had never heard of a Max before. The more I read, the clearer it became. My wife was cheating on me, and it was with someone who seemed to mean a lot to her. I staggered back, reeling from the realization as if someone had punched me in the gut. I spent the night wide awake, replaying every moment, every excuse. I felt rage building up inside me. How could she do this to me? How could she lie so seamlessly? My heart raced and my mind spun with 1,000 emotions: betrayal, anger, sadness, and confusion. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. The next morning, I confronted her again. This time I was armed with evidence. I pulled up her messages, and the look on her face shifted from annoyance to pure panic. "Jake, please, it's not what it looks like." She stammered, her voice trembling. I could see the fear in her eyes, but all I could feel was the burning pain of betrayal. "You were texting him about old times, Sarah. What do you mean it's not what it looks like?" I practically shouted. I couldn't keep my voice steady. The hurt was too raw. She tried to spin a story, saying it was just harmless flirting, that it didn't mean anything. But as I watched her, I realized I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I felt like a fool, and I was done. I needed to act, but what would that look like? How do you handle a betrayal like this? As I sat there, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, a thought began to form. I wanted her to feel the pain she had caused me, to experience something akin to the heartbreak I was feeling. My heart raced as I started to piece together a plan. I looked her in the eyes, and I knew at that moment that my life was about to take a turn I never saw coming. This was just the beginning, and I was determined to make sure Sarah would never forget what she had done. I wanted poetic justice. The silence in the room was deafening after Sarah's frantic excuses fell flat. I was numb, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. It was like a surreal nightmare I couldn't wake up from, a moment frozen in time. As much as I wanted to scream, part of me felt exhausted, exhausted from the lies, the deceit, and the facade we had built together. I knew I needed a plan, but not just any plan. I wanted revenge that would make Sarah truly understand the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just about her cheating, it was about the trust she had shattered. I wanted her to feel every ounce of pain I felt. But how? I started thinking about the most effective way to execute my plan. I had always been the kind of husband who wanted to work things out, to fight for our marriage. But now, that seemed impossible. The betrayal cut too deep. I felt like a fool for believing her when she said she adored me. So, here I was, contemplating revenge while still reeling from betrayal. I decided to play the role of the husband who was willing to work it out, to see if she would backtrack, confess, or maybe even let something slip that could help me build my case for the ultimate revenge. I took a deep breath, masking my anger behind a calm exterior. "Okay, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, almost cool. "Let's say I believe you. Let's work through this. I want to understand what led you to text Max in the first place." She looked at me, probably relieved that I wasn't throwing her out immediately. "Really? You mean it?" Her eyes widened, and I could see the wheels in her head turning, wondering if she could get out of this mess. "I do," I replied, even though every word felt like venom in my throat. "I want to be transparent. I want you to be honest with me about everything, even if it hurts." "Let's talk." Sarah seemed to relax a little, and, despite the rage bubbling under my skin, I played the part of the willing husband, asking her questions and listening to her half-hearted explanations. She spun a tale of loneliness, claiming she felt neglected because I had been so focused on work. In her mind, it justified her actions. I watched her, feigning concern, while I internally plotted my next move. As days turned into weeks, I became a master at playing the good husband. I'd cook dinner, help with chores, and even suggest date nights to keep up appearances. But every time Sarah received a message, I felt a fire ignite within me. The more I watched her, the more I realized I didn't recognize this woman anymore. The woman I had married was fading, replaced by a stranger who thrived on deception. I decided to gather more information. I knew Max was the key to unveiling the full extent of her betrayal. I started digging, using social media to my advantage. I found Max's profile, a local magician who posted pictures of himself performing at various gigs. He seemed flashy and charismatic, just the type to attract someone like Sarah. I found a performance he had coming up at a nearby bar. The thought of seeing them together made my stomach churn, but it was an opportunity. I could gather evidence that would make my revenge feel justified. I bought a ticket under the guise of wanting to check out the local talent, but my real motivation was to confirm the affair. The night of the show, I felt a mix of dread and excitement. I arrived early, sitting at the bar, nursing a drink and trying to calm my racing heart. The place was dimly lit, filled with laughter and chatter as people gathered to watch the magician perform his tricks. As I waited, I noticed Sarah walk in, accompanied by a group of friends. My heart raced as I saw her smile, an expression I had come to associate with deceit. She seemed so carefree, so different from the woman who had been caught lying just weeks prior. I kept my distance, blending into the crowd, and that's when I saw him, Max. He was everything I expected and more. Charismatic, flashy, and incredibly confident, he commanded the room. As he took the stage, I couldn't tear my eyes away from Sarah's reaction. She was enthralled, laughing at his jokes, leaning in closer to him as he performed. My heart sank further with each passing moment, feeling the sting of betrayal deep in my gut. As the night went on, I captured snippets of their conversation, their chemistry palpable. At one point, they even shared a laugh that felt intimate. I was enraged, but I continued to keep my composure, knowing that this moment was vital for my revenge. After the performance, I watched as Sarah and Max stepped outside together, her laughter echoing in the night air. I could feel my blood boiling. I didn't confront them then. I wanted to wait until I had everything lined up perfectly. I needed proof that would shatter her world as she had shattered mine. I returned home that night, still replaying the events in my mind. I felt like I had uncovered a massive piece of the puzzle, but I needed more. I had to think about how I would execute my plan. It had to be clever, poetic, and impactful. As I laid in bed, a sinister smile crept onto my face. I was ready to make my move. I had spent weeks pretending to be the understanding husband, but I was no longer that man. I was ready to show Sarah that she had played a dangerous game, and now it was time for me to take control. The magician who had pulled her strings would soon find out that I could play tricks too, tricks that would make Sarah disappear from my life entirely. The days following that fateful night felt like a blur of planning and plotting. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's laughter with Max, the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at him. It was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest, and the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I wanted to show her that she had made a grave mistake, one that wouldn't just go unpunished. The first step in my plan was to gather undeniable proof. I knew I had to keep my distance from Sarah while staying close enough to observe her routine. I started timing her late-night outings. I'd see her leave with friends, supposedly going for drinks or to dinner, but I knew where she was really headed. Max was often performing at the same bar, and I had a feeling Sarah was going to see him more frequently than she cared to admit. I started following her, discreetly of course. I parked a few blocks away, keeping my distance as I watched her enter the bar. Each time my heart raced with a mix of anger and determination. I took notes, documenting when she left, how long she stayed, and who she interacted with. It was all about building my case, creating a web of evidence that would shatter her lies. After a couple of weeks of this routine, I had a treasure trove of information. I had captured photos of her entering and leaving the bar, mingling with Max, and even a few candid shots of them sitting together at a table, her hand brushing against his. This wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown affair, and I had the proof to back it up. But I knew that just having evidence wouldn't be enough. I needed to execute my plan perfectly. I wanted to make sure she felt the weight of her betrayal in a way that was both public and humiliating. I wanted her to know that I had seen everything, that I had been watching her. All along, I decided to arrange a confrontation that would take place during one of Max's shows. It would be a calculated risk, but I was ready to gamble. I purchased tickets for the upcoming performance and prepared myself for the big reveal. I even invited a few of our mutual friends along, wanting there to be witnesses to the unfolding drama. The night of the show, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I arrived at the bar early, taking a position at a table close to the stage. I watched as the place filled up with people, including Sarah and her friends. They arrived in high spirits, and I could see Sarah eagerly scanning the room for Max. As the show began, I focused on maintaining my composure. I could feel the excitement in the air as Max took the stage, dazzling everyone with his tricks and charisma. The crowd was captivated, but my eyes were fixed on Sarah. I could see her leaning closer to the stage, her laughter ringing through the air like music. Finally, it happened. Midway through the show, Max invited a volunteer from the audience to join him on stage. My heart raced as I watched him scan the crowd. Who should it be? How about you? He pointed directly at Sarah, and the audience erupted in applause. I couldn't believe it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Sarah shot up from her seat, giddy with excitement, and made her way to the stage. My stomach churned with a mix of anger and anticipation. As she joined Max, the crowd cheered, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. On stage, Max performed his usual tricks, making Sarah the center of attention. She was glowing, completely caught up in the moment. I could hardly sit still, my mind racing with thoughts of how to execute the next phase of my plan. Then it was time. As the show reached its peak, Max prepared for the grand finale, a trick involving a disappearing act. For my next illusion, I need someone who has a great sense of humor and can handle the unexpected. He grinned, and the crowd roared with laughter. Just then I stood up, my voice cutting through the applause. "I think I can help with that, Max." I made my way to the stage, and the audience fell silent, confusion spreading across their faces. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw me, and for a brief moment the excitement faded. "What are you doing here, Jake?" she whispered, a hint of panic in her voice. I ignored her, stepping closer to Max. "I've got something to show you all." With that, I pulled out my phone, opening the gallery to the pictures I had collected over the past few weeks. I flashed them on the screen for everyone to see, Sarah smiling, flirty texts, and candid moments with Max. Gasps filled the room as the audience absorbed the shocking revelation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is my wife, and this is her harmless flirting with this man right here," I declared, pointing directly at Max. The laughter turned to murmurs, and I could see Sarah's face drain of color. "Jake, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "This isn't just entertainment, folks. This is betrayal at its finest," I continued, relishing the power of the moment. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too, but here's the twist: I'm done being the fool. The crowd buzzed with shock, and I could see the realization dawning on the people I had invited, our friends, my coworkers, even a few family members. They all looked confused, some shocked and others horrified. Max, who stood awkwardly next to Sarah, looked like a deer caught in headlights. I didn't know," he began, but I cut him off. "It's not about you, Max. It's about the woman who promised to love me and instead chose to betray me. You may have your tricks, but I've just pulled back the curtain on the biggest illusion of my life." As I stepped back, letting the reality of the situation sink in for everyone, I could see the tears welling in Sarah's eyes. I had done what I set out to do: expose her lies, reveal the truth, and make her feel the consequences of her actions. The aftermath of that moment would be far-reaching, but I was ready for anything. I had finally taken control, and I wouldn't allow her to manipulate me any longer. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I was no longer just a victim. I was a survivor, armed with the truth and ready to move forward. The show had turned into a spectacle, and as people began to disperse, whispers filled the air. I knew this was just the beginning of my journey, but it was a pivotal moment that I would never forget. The magician had lost his audience, and now it was time for me to disappear from her life for good. The aftermath of that night was a whirlwind of emotions and reactions. As the audience slowly began to disperse, I could see a mix of shock and disbelief on the faces of our friends and acquaintances. The applause had died down, replaced by murmurs and whispers about what had just unfolded. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel it pressing down on me as I walked away from the stage, leaving a stunned Sarah standing there, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't look back. I had exposed the truth, and now it was time for me to regain my dignity. The anger that had fueled my actions began to ebb away, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I had confronted my wife in the most public way possible, and the thrill of that moment still coursed through my veins. But it was also a sobering reality. This was not just about revenge, this was about reclaiming my life. As I stepped outside the bar, a cool breeze hit my face and I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had taken control of the narrative, and the burden of Sarah's betrayal was finally lifted. I knew there would be consequences, both for Sarah and for me, but at that moment I felt liberated. I walked to my car, ready to head home. I needed time to process everything that had happened. I didn't even think about checking my phone. It was probably flooded with messages from friends and family wanting to know what had just gone down. I simply drove in silence, my mind racing with thoughts of the future. When I arrived home, the house felt eerily quiet. I hadn't expected Sarah to be there, but part of me wondered if she had followed me. I opened the door and was met with the sight of the home we had built together, the memories of happier times flooding back. I felt a pang of sadness for what had been lost, but I pushed it aside. There was no room for that right now. Just as I settled onto the couch, my phone buzzed with an influx of messages. It was a barrage of texts from our friends, each one asking for clarification, some expressing their shock at what had transpired. I ignored them for the moment. I needed to gather my thoughts before I addressed anyone. Minutes later, I heard the front door creak open. I turned to see Sarah walking in, her face a mask of desperation and hurt. "Jake," she started, her voice shaky, "please let me explain." I raised my hand, stopping her in her tracks. "You had your chance to explain, Sarah. You chose to lie to me, to betray our marriage, and to humiliate me in front of our friends. What more is there to say?" Tears streamed down her face as she took a step closer. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was just a fling, I promise. I swear I love you." Her words felt hollow to me, and I couldn't help but feel a bitter laugh rising in my throat. "A fling? You think that makes it okay? You don't get to redefine this, Sarah. You made your choice, and it wasn't me. I was lonely, Jake. You were always working, and I felt like I was invisible. Max was there, and I thought maybe it would fill the void. Fill the void, I echoed, incredulous. So you decided to open your legs to some magician. That was your bright idea. She flinched at my words, and for the first time since this all began, I felt guilty for the harshness in my voice. But I quickly shook it off. There was no room for guilt in this conversation. No more excuses, Sarah. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I can't believe you would do this to me. She sobbed, her cries echoing through the empty house. Do you really think this is who I am? You don't even know me anymore. I crossed my arms, my heart hardening once again. You've shown me exactly who you are. You lied to my face and smiled while you did it. I don't recognize you anymore. Either just give me a chance to make it right. She pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I'll do anything, I shook my head. Anything? What could you possibly do to make this right? You've destroyed our trust. You think I can just forget? This isn't something you can fix with empty promises. I'm begging you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I love you, Jake. I made a mistake. A mistake? I interrupted, my voice rising. A mistake implies it was an accident. You consciously chose to betray me. You made that decision time and time again. Sarah fell silent, her shoulders slumping as the reality of my words sank in. I felt a bittersweet satisfaction in seeing her broken, but also a weight in my chest. I had once loved this woman, and now I was watching her crumble before me. Maybe I should go, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe you should, I replied, my heart heavy with finality. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the remnants of our shattered marriage. I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sorrow. I had made my point, but the pain of losing her still lingered. In the days that followed, we lived in the same house but in separate worlds. Sarah was quieter, more withdrawn, and I leaned into the silence. I spent my evenings reflecting on everything that had happened, and I began to realize that this was more than just an act of revenge. It was a cathartic release. I started focusing on myself, rediscovering hobbies I had neglected, working out, cooking, even picking up a few old books. I found solace in the things that made me happy before. I began to see that I had lost a part of myself in trying to make our marriage work while Sarah drifted away. Eventually, I thought about confronting her again, but this time, it would be about closure rather than anger. I wanted to know if she would truly take responsibility for her actions or if she would continue to deflect the blame. One evening, I found her sitting on the porch, looking out into the night. I took a deep breath and approached her. Can we talk? She nodded quietly, her eyes filled with remorse. I want to know what you're thinking, I said, sitting down next to her. Do you understand what you did? I do, she replied, her voice trembling. I didn't think it would escalate the way it did. I just wanted to feel loved, wanted, and I messed that up. I know I hurt you. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. Do you really love me, Sarah, or is it just guilt talking? I've loved you all along, Jake. I think I lost sight of that when I started feeling lonely. But I understand now that I took you for granted, and I don't blame you for what you did that night. Her honesty was refreshing, but it didn't erase the pain. What do you want now? I asked pointedly. I want to try and make amends. I want to work on myself and figure out who I am outside of this mess. I don't expect you to take me back, but I want to be better, better for myself, better for you, and whoever I become next. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and it shook me. I don't know. Sarah, that's a lot to unpack, and it's going to take time. I get that, she said softly. I know I don't deserve forgiveness right away, but I promise to work on myself. I want you to be happy, even if that's not with me. Her words hung in the air between us, and I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a glimmer of hope. I didn't know what our future would hold, but I recognized that we were both in a process of healing, however complicated that healing might be. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt the tiniest shift in my heart. The journey of revenge had been cathartic, but perhaps the next step wouldn't simply be about revenge or closure. Maybe it would be about learning to forgive ourselves, whatever that might look like. But for now, I needed to focus on me, to reclaim my life. The road ahead would be long, but I was ready to walk it. The magician may have made Sarah disappear from my life temporarily, but the journey to healing wasn't over yet. Over the following weeks, life in our house took on a New rhythm. There was an uneasy truce between Sarah and me, a fragile peace forged in the wake of betrayal. We were both navigating uncharted waters, and while the pain of her infidelity lingered, I found a strange sense of solace in the honesty of our conversations. Sarah was earnest in her desire to change, and I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. She started attending therapy, something I encouraged her to do. It was evident that she needed to work through the issues that had led to her betrayal, issues of loneliness, self-esteem, and the sense of being overlooked in our marriage. I knew that addressing these would be essential for her growth, but I also realized I had my own journey to navigate. I, too, began to explore my feelings more deeply. The initial rush of anger had faded, replaced with a bittersweet understanding of what had transpired. I'd been hurt, yes, but I also recognized my role in the unraveling of our relationship. I had been wrapped up in my career, often neglecting the emotional connection that had initially brought us together. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I knew I needed to take responsibility for my part in this mess. As days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more at ease in my own skin. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during our marriage, and I even started going out more, rediscovering interests I had put on the back burner. I took up rock climbing again, a passion I had almost abandoned. There was something liberating about pushing my physical limits, and it helped clear my mind. Despite this newfound independence, the tension between Sarah and me remained palpable. We had both acknowledged the cracks in our marriage, but we were still figuring out if it was possible to rebuild what had been broken. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, Sarah walked in with a determined look on her face. She took a deep breath and sat beside me. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "About what?" I asked, curious. "About us. I know things can't go back to how they were, but I want to know if there's a chance for us to move forward. I want to rebuild our relationship, brick by brick." I paused, considering her words. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that I know I have a lot of work to do on myself, but I also want to work on us. I want to be better for you if you'll allow me to be in your life again. I miss you, Jake." Her eyes shimmered with sincerity. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of me was hesitant to engage in this conversation, still harboring the scars of her betrayal. But another part of me recognized the vulnerability she was showing. "It's not that simple, Sarah. Trust isn't built in a day," I replied carefully. "I know," she said quickly, "but I'm willing to put in the effort. I'm ready to prove to you that I'm committed to changing, and I want to show you how much you mean to me." Her words hung in the air, and I could see the hope in her eyes. It was hard to ignore the little spark of affection I still felt for her. "What does that look like for you?" "Rebuilding trust is a process, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to jump back in." "I understand," she said softly. "I just want the chance to try. Maybe we can start small. We could go out for coffee, take it one step at a time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing." I sighed, feeling the weight of my heart in my chest. It felt as though we were both standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. I didn't want to rush into anything, but the idea of taking baby steps intrigued me. "Okay, let's start with coffee. But I need time to process everything. I'm not making any promises." "Just give me a chance," she urged, her voice filled with genuine hope. I nodded, deciding to give it a shot. We agreed to meet the next Saturday at a local cafe, a spot we had frequented in happier times. I was both nervous and curious about what our conversation would hold. The day arrived, and I found myself pacing the house, trying to gather my thoughts. I wanted to be open but also guarded. As I drove to the cafe, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. When I walked in, I spotted Sarah at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with her hands. She looked up and smiled as I approached, and I noticed how genuinely happy she looked. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could sense a shift in the atmosphere, a tentative hopefulness hanging between us. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here," I replied, signaling to the waiter for 2 coffees. As we sat across from each other, the weight of our past hung heavily in the air. "Jake, I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I want to be honest with you about everything that happened," she began, her eyes locked onto mine. I nodded, encouraging her to continue, but my heart raced as I braced for whatever she had to say. "I never wanted to hurt you," she continued, tears forming in her eyes. "I felt so lost and alone, and I got caught up in this fantasy with Max. But it was never about him. It was about my own insecurities and fears. I thought I could find happiness elsewhere, but I only ended up losing the most important thing in my life, us." I listened intently, watching her as she lowered her gaze. "I've realized that what I really want is to work on myself and our marriage. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm committed to this. I want to earn your trust again." Her vulnerability tugged at my heart, and for the first time in a long time I felt a flicker of hope. "It's going to take time, Sarah," I cautioned. "But if you're serious about this, I'm willing to try." "I am," she promised, her voice steady. The conversation shifted from the past to the future, talking about our goals, our dreams, and the things that had brought us together in the first place. I found myself remembering the laughter, the adventures, and the connection that had once defined our relationship. As we sipped our coffees and began to reminisce, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. We were both on the brink of something new, a chance to redefine our relationship on our terms. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but I felt a renewed sense of hope. This was just the beginning of our journey toward healing, and I was cautiously optimistic about where it might lead us. Maybe we could find a way to move forward together or, at the very least, find closure. One thing was clear. We both had a lot of work ahead, but at least we were willing to put in the effort. And in that moment, I realized that the magic I had once thought was lost might still be out there, waiting for us to uncover it together. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I began to navigate the delicate process of rebuilding our relationship. The conversations we had over coffee became a regular occurrence, and each meeting felt like a small step forward into uncharted territory. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and the dreams we had put on hold. Slowly, I started to see the woman I had fallen in love with emerge from the shadows of her mistakes. In therapy, Sarah began to unpack her emotions and confront the issues that had led her down the path of infidelity. She started to understand the loneliness that had driven her to seek validation elsewhere. I admired her determination to work on herself, and it sparked a sense of hope within me. I was beginning to understand that healing wouldn't just come from her efforts, it would require my active participation as well. I started attending therapy sessions too, seeking to understand my own shortcomings. I realized that my ambition, while a part of who I was, had often blinded me to the needs of my partner. I had become so focused on my career that I had neglected to nurture the emotional connection that held our marriage together. With the guidance of my therapist, I learned how to express my feelings more openly and to prioritize the people I cared about. Together, Sarah and I began to forge a new path. We set aside time for weekly date nights, reintroducing playfulness and laughter into our lives. We explored new restaurants, took up hiking, and even started cooking together again. Each shared experience became a brick in the foundation we were rebuilding, reminding us of the joy that had once defined our relationship. Still, the shadows of the past lingered. There were moments when doubt would creep in, when I would catch her looking at her phone or when I'd see a lingering smile on her face that resembled the one she had worn with Max. I had to remind myself that healing was not linear. We were both learning to trust again, and it would take time for my heart to catch up with my mind. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me, her expression serious. "I know I've put you through so much, and I can't change the past, but I want you to know how grateful I am for your willingness to give us a second chance," she said softly. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words wash over me. "It's not easy to forget, Sarah, but I'm willing to try. I think we've both learned valuable lessons, and I want us to grow from this." Her eyes shimmered with gratitude, and I could see the sincerity in her gaze. "I'll never stop working to earn your trust. I don't want to be the person I was before. I want to be better for both of us." As I sat there, I realized that we were both in a state of transformation. We were learning to be vulnerable with each other, to express our needs openly and honestly. It was a painful process, but it was also a beautiful one. We were shedding the layers of hurt and betrayal, inch by inch. One night, Sarah surprised me with a small gathering of our closest friends at our home. It was a celebration of sorts, not just for our friendship, but for the progress we had made in our marriage. As laughter filled the air, I watched Sarah interact with our friends, her genuine smile lighting up the room. It was a stark reminder of the person I had fallen in love with, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had been on. The betrayal had been a devastating blow, but it had also opened the door to deeper understanding and growth. It forced us both to confront our vulnerabilities and to prioritize our relationship in a way we hadn't before. Later that night, when our friends had gone home, I took a moment to sit down with Sarah. "I'm proud of how far we've come," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I feel like we're building something stronger." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I feel the same way. I know we have a long way to go, but I truly believe we can get through this together." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of commitment to our journey. It wouldn't be a perfect fairy tale, but it was a path we were choosing to walk together. I realized that the magic we had both sought, individually and as a couple, wasn't about illusions or tricks. It was about genuine connection, trust, and the willingness to grow. Over time, the scars from her betrayal didn't disappear entirely, but they became a part of our story, a reminder of how far we had come. We learned to communicate more openly, to check in with each other emotionally, and to celebrate the small victories. Trust was rebuilt slowly, and with each passing day, the bond between us grew stronger. While I had once sought revenge as a form of poetic justice, I discovered that forgiveness and understanding could be far more powerful. The journey had transformed me, and I hoped it had transformed Sarah as well. It wasn't just about making her disappear from my life. It was about discovering a new version of our relationship that was rooted in honesty and love. In the end, I came to understand that relationships are a constant work in progress. The road to healing is often rocky, filled with twists and turns, but if both partners are willing to put in the effort, it can lead to a deeper connection that emerges from the ashes of betrayal. As I looked at Sarah that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were no longer just two people lost in our pain. We were partners ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. And in that moment, I knew we had found our way back to each other, not through revenge, but through love and the promise of a brighter future.